Okay, this is a demo to show you how to set up and work with a basic navigation system in Unity. Uh, Several students were wanting to have objects follow them as they move through the environment, so this is one way to do it. There are a number of uh, techniques one might use, but the one that's been around the longest is using the NavMesh system in Unity. You can also use various AI solutions. For instance, I have one linked here on the Art Games resources page here called AI and NPC Tools and Tips. And if you go to that page, you'll see that it takes you here to this Unity set of documents on various technologies that you might use to do that. Of course, AI is artificial intelligence, and NPCs, non-player characters, and so the general idea is that you set up a set of rules and procedures that determine pathfinding systems within the game, so that your players that are not being run or operated by humans will actually exhibit some sort of intelligence and find their way throughout the environment without walking through things or without walking off the edge of the cliff and this sort of thing. So it's essentially just to set up a sort of intelligence in the game. This tutorial is pretty interesting. It points you to using a free library called Elliott AI Free, and that might be something you might want to look at if you want something a little more sophisticated than what I'm going to show you. But in general, the idea of using Unity's NavMesh system works for basic types of things that we might want to do. So let's take a look at that. See what we got. All right, so here's a scene that I've started in Unity, just called NavMesh project, and I'm going to play this. This essentially will show you what we're talking about here, how we're trying to get started. You can see that sphere drops to the ground plane, and then it automatically finds its way to the other sphere on the other side of the plane that we've got there. So I'm going to show you how to set up something like that, and I'll just start it from scratch so you can see the whole thing in process. Okay, so the first thing I'll do is make a new scene, and I'll just save that as demo scene, demo nav. How about that? Demo scene. I'll just call it demo. All right, and the first thing we want to do is create an empty game object, and I'm just going to call this geo, and inside our geo container there I will create a cube, and the cube this is going to be our ground plane. Scale it down pretty flat, doesn't need to be big. Alright, so we'll just think of this as our ground plane, and it's always important in Unity to name things, so I'll just call that ground, and then we're going to want some stuff on our ground plane to navigate around, and I'll just do that again, another cube. Make some obstacles, and I'll duplicate this one and make another one over here. Command D, make another one. Command D, make another one. Let's move this one this way, and we can move this one. So I'm basically just going to set up kind of like a little maze thing. It's really not important what exactly it is for purposes of demonstration, but we'll make it interesting. If I put this one right here, kind of make it shorter and taller. Doesn't. See how smart our AI is if it can figure out how to get through a little more complicated environment. Kind of make that a little tight so it won't quite fit through there. Put one over here. All right, let's say that's good enough. I'm going to select all of these guys and just call them all cubes. All right. Okie doke. Then we're going to need ourselves a couple of spheres. We'll call this one our player. I'll put it over here. And I'm going to scale it up a little bit so it may or may not fit through some of these little apertures we've created. And I'm going to duplicate that. Move it over here. This will be our target, our destination. That might be a little too big, but we'll see what happens. So we're going to call this one our player. It could be anything. I'm just calling it that for grins. And this one here we'll call our target. All right. Okie doke. I want to get our camera to have a decent looking point of view here. So while that's selected, I'm going to select my main camera, and I'm going to go align with view. So it aligns our camera with this view that we've set over here on this side. All right, and I'm going to save my scene. Okay, so there's the basic setup. Next thing we need to do is we need to tell the game engine the characteristics of the environment that we've created. And so all of these objects under Geo, all the way through here, should all be considered static. So we'll just mark them all as static objects. In other words, they're not going to be animated. They're not going to move themselves. The only thing that might move in this environment is the player character and possibly the destination. Okay, but there's a little bit of a difference between these objects, and we need to tell the computer how to pre-compute the areas that are navigable in this space. Okay, so right now I have my navigation pane is already open over here in the inspector. If for some reason yours isn't, then what you'll want to do is come over here to the window menu and pull down to AI and to navigation, and that will pop up that navigation pane. And notice over here now on the navigation pane that we have 4 different types of activities. We have object-based activities, we have baking, we have areas, and we have agents. And so right now what we're interested in is in defining the object characteristics. And so we need to tell the game engine this object is walkable and these objects are not walkable. So if I select just the ground plane, that's a static area, a static piece of geometry. and it's definitely walkable. We want our character or our objects to be able to navigate on the surface of that, and that it is walkable. The obstacles that we've created here, these cubes, are definitely not walkable. We want them to be barriers that get in the way of our ability to navigate the environment. So once we've determined those two characteristics of this geometry, then the next thing that we want to do is we want to tell the computer to bake the characteristics into some sort of a simulation. So I'll hit the bake, and notice that it creates this, what is essentially a polygonal overlay over the top of the ground plane that's color coded in blue, and it designates, that's called a NavMesh. And so that is the zone of the ground plane that can be navigated by an AI. Anything outside of that zone, or these little distances here along the base of our objects, are not navigable by AI. And we have to realize that this is all pre-computed, okay? In other words, this isn't going to change during the process of gameplay. We have to set this up, and we have to pre-compute the bake before we start playing. If we decide we want to move something, for instance, if I want to move this and move my geometry a little bit, I have to realize we got to come back here and rebake it so that it can make an adjustment. It moves these borders over and reconfigures what the navigable space is, or recomputes the NavMesh. Okay, so now if we were to play this right now, nothing would happen. And the reason is because we have to tell the computer about our agents. What are our agents in this environment? We don't have any agents, no AI characters or anything. Well, the main one we want to look at first here is our player character. So I'll select that, and I'll come back over here into our inspector. And what we need to do is add a component called a NavMesh agent component. And that tells the computer, okay, this thing here is going to be a NavMesh agent. It is going to have some sort of an AI on it, okay? And that in and of itself would not do anything, because what we need to do is give it some rules for how we want it to navigate the environment. So the next thing that we need to do to our NavMesh agent, or our player, is to add a script component. The way I would do that is I would come down here to New Script, and I would give it a name, and it would open up a file that was just a blank set of code, okay, that has no real code in it. Actually, let me just do that. I'm going to call this nav test. How about that? I'll just call it nav test. Create and add. Okay. And so we'll come into here, into our, looks like it's creating it. All right, so here it is. It's created our code called nav test, and I'm actually going to move it in here into my scripts folder. You always want to be good about taking care of your stuff, keeping it organized. So we have nav test. If I do this and double click it, it's going to open up. So this is what it would create if we just started from scratch and we had no code written and we wanted to write from scratch. Now, I know most of our people are not going to want to do that, but I just wanted to show you that that's the process if you're creating code from scratch, is you just create a new script, and it'll set everything up for you up to, and put these base declarations of a start and an update function inside of a class called whatever file name you give it, okay? Now, we already have one. I've already created a script for this project. So let me show you what you need to do, and I'll give you that script so that you can have a head start. So right here, instead of nav test, I'm going to click this little guy. Actually, it's not going to let me do it. what I need to do, I'm going to take NavAgent and I'm going to drag that over here. And I'm going to get rid of this. All right. So here's the script that is what you really want to use. All right. So notice we have a script called NavAgent. I've added to it using Unity Engine AI, which is the pathfinding system. I've created a serializable field, which is called goal, and you can see that over here in the inspector that that creates a goal variable that you can now, it's looking for a transform, all right? And so our goal transform is going to be, what do you think? Right over here, our target. So what we'll do is we'll grab this guy and drop it right in that slot, and you'll see it grabs the transform of it. And so now our player character here, our player, has a target, which is this object right here. Okay. All right, let's look a little more at the code. I've created a private variable here of type NavMesh agent and given it a name of _player_agent. And then in the start function, I use the get component function to grab a NavMesh agent, any NavMesh agent that is in our scene or that this script is attached to, which is our player. Our player is a NavMesh agent, and therefore this script that's attached to it will grab the NavMesh agent and all of these variables to work with. And then it stores it in that variable that I created called _player_agent. All right. Next, in the start function, this only happens the very first time when we start the script. It will grab the goal position, okay, the XYZ component of our goal, our target here, and put it into the player agent's destination variable. In other words, we're telling our player agent, hey, go for this goal, look for this goal, and here's its position. All right. In the update function, I've taken that same variable and we reassign its goal position on a frame-by-frame basis. You don't really have to have this update if you just want to go to a certain target and the target's not going to move. But because this is in an update, it means that we can actually move, any moving target will also follow. So I'll show you how that works here in just a second. All right, so let's go back. I'm going to hit save. And then we're going to run this and let's see what happens. All right. There it goes. It's finding the shortest path. That's its only goal, is to find the shortest path to get to the destination. And there it is. It's found it. And because I have the update function working, if we move this sphere, it will continue to seek that sphere as a destination. Now it looks like we don't have collisions on here. If we had collisions on here, then it would be a little bit harder for it to navigate. It is actually avoiding it's following the NavMesh path, but it's not bumping into the spheres or into the barriers. Pretty cool, huh? Let's move this over here and see what it does. See if it'll fall off the end of the earth. Nope, gets as close as it can and then it stops. Okay, I do believe that is all you need to know in order to get a basic NavMesh system working, and you're off and running, so to speak. And that is all.